Hello, everybody, and welcome to this June 16th edition of the O'Hara News and Editorial. We have as our guest tonight Dan Moore. Dan, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing fine, thanks. Yourself?
Great, doing really good. I'm really glad that you agreed to come on the show tonight. This is something I've been wanting to do since last year when we met face to face at the conference in Detroit or St. Clair Shores. It was so great meeting you, and it was. It's always nice to meet another MRA and talk and have a beer with them. And I'm really glad that you decided to come on the show tonight. And I'm really happy to have you here. So.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I actually had a blast last summer.
I think everybody had a blast.
Everybody did.
Yeah.
I think Paul's right, though. The biggest draw was really actually meeting everybody and people that we've been talking to
for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to talk about your tenure as a men's rights activist during the show, but kind of going back to keeping with the original purpose of the show, we're going to talk about a couple of news stories. I'm glad that you're with us, so I'm going to ask you to comment on a couple of them.
Sure.
And we'll talk about them throughout the show because we like to keep current here. And then after we talk about these news stories, we'll talk about you.
my favorite subject.
Yes, of course. And tonight, it's my favorite subject.
Aww.
Oh, only I love you, Dan.
I feel so loved.
Anyway, this really sad story, and we talk about a lot of sad stories on this show, unfortunately, comes from the community of the wrongly accused. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Pierce Harlan, just a great, really one of the gems of the men's rights movement, who has a great blog that everyone should go to. Published today, a sad story about a wrestling coach who blogged about his son's ordeal in a college sex kangaroo court, who has been fired. This was dated today. The title reads, as I just said, the wrestling coach who blogged about his son's ordeal in a college sex kangaroo court has been fired. Chalk up another victory for the college sexual grievance industry. C.D. Mock, the UNC Chapel Hill head wrestling coach who has openly criticized the way universities handle sexual assault allegations in the wake of his son's ordeal at another college, has been fired. See here. Of course, he has a link there. I'll put it in the chat box pretty soon.
Wait a second, Bob. He was at another school?
Yeah, his son was at another school.
Okay.
And it's a short article. We do short articles on the show, so just be like, no, it's okay, no problem. But it just take a minute to read it. The administration claims the firing was due to, quote, performance issues. But Mr. Mock says, quote, it's difficult to ignore the timing of this. He writes, it's ironic. The act of firing me may be confirming my viewpoint. There is a very dangerous thing happening across this country that is transforming our concept of personal freedom and individual rights. We are beginning to tolerate the idea that it is okay and in fact a reasonable strategy to silence any opposition to one's beliefs and views rather than to encourage debate. I was fired because my beliefs and views differ from those of the leadership at UNC. Was I fired because of my beliefs and views differ from leadership at UNC? If one believes this to be true, there should be outrage throughout the Carolina community. Certainly not because a wrestling coach was fired, but because a major university may have taken extreme measures to silence one of its own who is a vocal critic on an issue that has nothing to do with that individual's job. Is the next firing going to be because of one's religious preference? Or perhaps the next coach or professor fired at UNC will be because of his or her views on gay rights? If this is okay, where does this end? Okay, so, of course, Pierce Harlan finishes off in his usual classy way, but since we just read what this guy said about his own firing and his experience about talking about his son's ordeal at another school, let's talk about this. This is real bullshit here.
Well, I would love to say it's just outrageous and weird, but it's been going on for years.
Going for years, absolutely, yes.
It started actually in the military. Now, believe it or not, in the U.S. military, you cannot be a Christian. I'm not shitting you at all. If you're a Christian, you can be court-martialed for wearing a cross in the U.S. military. So is thought policing around? Absolutely. It's been around for a long, long time. It started out, of course, in the academia. So a professor or somebody working in the university system, it would make sense that they would be sort of targeted by it fairly early. But you got to keep in mind that government agencies and government entities such as the military, and I'm sure that's been going all the way through everything else, has been purging people based on their political beliefs for decades, and definitely very, very accelerated rate in the last few years. And if anybody's been paying any attention at all, the government of the United States has repeatedly, in many different ways, said that the biggest enemies of the United States are, again, gun owners, patriots, constitutionalists, etc. That is criminalizing your political opposition. And it is not the first time, it's not the last, it's going to get a whole lot worse unless people wake the hell up. Because it's been going on for a long time. And if you stick your head in the sand and you say, this never goes on, or it's okay these ways, but it's not okay these ways, like, anybody that's outraged by this better be outraged by all the other stuff as well. And that's leftists, right-wingers, everybody. Because when the government can tell you what you can and cannot believe, and when they selectively enforce the laws, which is another hallmark of what's been going on the last decade or two, that's tyranny. That's just straight up tyranny. It is not a democracy. It's not fascism. It's not anything other than an oligarchic tyranny. And that's sort of where we're headed. Primarily because people are afraid to say anything. People don't speak up.
So, okay, you said that's where we're headed. A lot of people say that's where we are already, especially in the education system, as is the case in this story. But also, and I want to talk about this with you later on, but also people who happen to find themselves in the family court system.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's been a sort of a point of the spear for a lot of these.
I mean, already a real tyranny where you get your kids taken away from you, you get your property taken away from you, and there's nothing you can do about it. If you don't comply, you go to jail. You stay in jail until you comply.
I think it was about a week ago. An 11-year-old boy came home from school, and his parents were about an hour late getting home from work, as usual. They usually got home around 5. They got home around 6. The boy played basketball in the backyard. CPS came by, took the child, and charged the parents with child endangerment. And this is about a week ago. So family court is nowhere near as bad as it gets anymore. And people are losing their kids left, right, and center. They're getting them taken away by Child Protective Services, which has the absolute worst record, by the way, for protection of natural children.
For actually, right? Keeping them safe. Yes.
Yeah, they've got known pedophiles and child molesters as foster parents, and they know that they are.
And the absolute best record is actually keeping the family together, keep dad and mom together in the house. But that's actually what they target. That's actually what they wanted to tear apart. And there's no doubt about this. This is not some paranoid fantasy. This is what, and their stated aim. It was their stated aim.
Yes.
You go back far enough.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, the idea of people losing their job for speaking up, it kind of goes back to my little video rant that we started this whole little bit here. People have to start speaking up. They have to stop worrying about their job and their reputation and how they are going to look. The odds don't matter anymore. If you don't speak up, if you don't fight, you're dead. Period. You're going to lose. And even if you do stand up and fight as hard as you can, it's been left to atrophy for so long. I don't think that there's a chance of winning anymore. I don't.
We're going to talk about this in depth later on in the show, and this is actually one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, is this difference between people who do activism and people who see the way forward in other ways.
Right.
This is something that this is a conversation I've been dying to have, which I've had with other MGTOWs before, and in other, PUAs and whatever. And I think it's unfortunately it needs to be had again. But anyway, we'll get to that later on.
Sure.
Right now, I want to go on to the next story. This is coming from the Telegraph, a UK publication. The title is Pakistan Tribunal Court Convicts a 10-year-old boy for an affair with a married woman. The boy was ordered to pay a fine of £4,400. That's, again, I did the conversions around, 450,000 rupees in Pakistan currency for the alleged affair with a woman who was in her late 30s. That's a 15-year-old boy here. All right, I'm sorry, a 10-year-old boy talking with having a quote affair with a woman who's well over twice his age. Okay, a tribal court in southern Pakistan has convicted a 10-year-old boy of having an affair with a married woman in her late 30s and ordered him to pay a fine of 700,000 rupees, or £4,400. £4,400, police said on Tuesday. The incident occurred on Monday in the remote village of Bakrani in Sindh province, 320 miles north of Karachi. Quote, the 10-year-old was caught having an extramarital affair with a lady from another tribe, which created bad blood between the two tribes, a local police official requesting anonymity told APF. Quote, okay, we've heard this story before. It's all the same. Quote, the incident was later taken to a Jirga tribal court, which ordered the boy's family to pay a fine of 700,000 rupees to the aggrieved side. The boy's family paid 50,000 rupees up front and undertook to pay off the remaining amount within 3 months, he added. Umar Tafail, the chief police officer of the district, confirmed the incident but said the tribal court's decision was illegal and was under investigation. Heaven forbid that we should let local communities work out their own disputes. Quote, it has come to our knowledge that a Jirga was held to solve a dispute regarding an extramarital affair. We are looking into the incident as Jirgas are illegal, he told the APF. Under Pakistani's penal code, an adult male having sex with a female child is considered to have committed statutory rape, but a woman having sex with a male child does not come under the law. The woman could, however, be prosecuted for sexual assault or unnatural sexual acts, lawyer Sundas Hurain told APF. Adultery is also a crime, but rarely prosecuted. Jirgas typically take the form of a council of male elders assigned to resolve disputes. They have repeatedly come in for criticism for issuing controversial decisions, including forcibly marrying off young girls to end family feuds. Interesting how they added that in there. Even though this 10-year-old kid was fucking raped by a goddamn 38-year-old woman, seriously.
Well, yeah, but you know what happens.
Yeah, that's of course, In July 2013, Pakistan's Supreme Court declared the Jirgas illegal and asked provincial authorities to clamp down on them. How dare those people actually take care of their own business? But they persist in rural areas as a dispute settlement mechanism for people without the means to use regular courts. So this is interesting, and this kind of touches on what we've been talking about, how there's this idea of the totalitarian state, and how many people think this is something that is unique to, well, I'm sorry, I say many people, not a whole lot of people, but unfortunately there are some people who think that this is something that is new or something that is unique to large Western wealthy states. It's not. There's this need for governments, even in the third world countries, to kind of take over. And it seems to me that the common theme, or the most successful theme nowadays, you can call it a theme, maybe not so much a theme, but a mechanism, is to demonize maleness and especially male sexuality in this regard. Because we're talking about a 10-year-old boy who's exploited sexually by a much older woman who you cannot say was a victim of anything.
But how is that? Okay, how does that differ in a marked way from the way that females that have sex with underage males in
It doesn't. That's what I'm
Washington
saying.
D.C.?
It doesn't. It doesn't differ. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't. There's definitely that common thread there, and it's not. And what I was saying was the mechanism used by the state is kind of becomes ubiquitous now, where it's so much easier to demonize male sexuality because we have these dirty little thingies in between our legs. So even if it's a 10-year-old boy, you can still throw this kid in jail or basically hold this kid ransom so his family can pay all this money to the aggrieved people. It seems to that actually I was agreeing. I'm saying it is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, maybe you're going along the same line. I didn't interrupt.
I don't. I really don't think that it's any different at all. I think
No.
that the same sort of gynocentric sort of viewpoint goes through pretty much every society on the planet, uh, which I guess doesn't surprise anybody that's been paying attention to this stuff. I mean, it's not exactly surprising when you hear, for example, that women are convicted less, arrested less, given lower sentences, given probation more often, spared jail just by the fact that they're female. I mean, there's legislation on the books in several European countries that are trying to, like, honestly, legitimately lower the possible sentence that a woman can get because she's a woman.
And in the UK they're doing away with women's prisons.
Oh, they're trying to, yeah.
Well, no, it's actually happening. This is confirmed. I mean, this is actually going on.
Oh, okay. Well, they've been trying to do that in Canada for a while too, and you got to keep in mind these are people that rely on two things. They rely, one, on false information and having the conduits to send that false information out there, and that would be the mainstream media. And two, they need people
whom they can rely on.
Quiet. They need people to be very quiet and just assume that if they speak up, they'll get in shit. And if they do speak up, they'll be the only one that thinks that way. And if they convince people to think that they are the only one that thinks that way, or that if they speak up, they'll lose everything, then they can do whatever the hell they want. Think about the radical feminist agenda from the 60s, and then tell me what they have not accomplished yet. Think of the wildest crap that they came up with, like 10% of the population of males left. All sex is rape. Huh? That was one that we figured was never going to happen. Well, they're already talking about bringing yes means yes to the federal and state level in the United States. I guarantee you it will be federal and state law by this time next year.
Well, the destruction of fatherhood has been almost complete legally.
Yeah. And that was spelled out.
There's no doubt about that.
They said that they wanted to deconstruct the family, to deconstruct society.
They said that. They still say that now. They still say now explicitly.
Yeah, they're a little less open about it. But yeah,
well, there's not too long ago, like Harriet Harman was on camera saying, the mother and the child is the future of the family in the UK.
Yeah.
Dad's not going to be part of the picture. She actually said that, like, on national television.
Now, the question that these
people haven't lost their bravado yet. They have not.
Well, they haven't. But okay, here's the question that I have: why don't people take them at their word? They're flat out saying, "We're going to do this, 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 and this," and you're going to hate me like you would never hated anybody before because it's so unjust. Harriet Harman actually said. She made a joke about all the men leaving the UK because of her policies.
Yes, I remember that.
Now, why don't people take them at their word? Why don't they believe them when they say, we are going to destroy your society?
This is a great topic, because for a long, and I saw this when I was working in higher education, and I tried to explain to other people what was going on. Yeah. And people tried to tell me, oh, they're just those crazy feminists. No one takes those people seriously. And I tried to tell them that, wait a minute, these people have actually taken over our education system. They have the media in their back pocket, and they have billions and billions of dollars of your taxpayer dollars coming towards them. And when you try to explain that to people, that is actually what is going on and has been going on for decades, they just blank out. They cannot believe it. because they're so used to the idea that these feminists are these poor, long-suffering, oppressed women who just want equality and they just keep on fighting. But I think it's because of a quirk of human nature that we have. That
it's called sticking your head in the sand.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's sticking your head in the sand, but also gynocentrism. It's this idea that because women must be protected, they must be the preferred sex. They must be idealized. And I've long said that the over-idealization of female sex is the most dangerous force in society today. And when I say that to people, they think I'm crazy. They think I'm a misogynist when I say that. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not crazy. I'm not a misogynist. I'm fucking for real.
Yeah, it's actually a very, very old thing. Okay, I'm not going to get too far into it because you can sound really nuts talking about this stuff. But I actually, for a couple of months, a while back, I remember when the whole feminism as false religion kind of thing kind of popped up a little bit in the manosphere. Well, I figured I was going to write an article about this. So I figured, okay, well, and I'm not a religious guy. I know nothing about religion. I never went to church growing up. I think I went into a church 3 times in my entire life. And once was for somebody's wedding, so I don't even know if that counts. But I thought, okay, I'll look into this and see if there is any truth to the idea of feminism being a false religion. And if you go back, I'm not shitting you at all. If you go back through Gaia, Artemis, Diana, Ashtaroth, the Queen of Heaven, etc., 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 all these religious figures, all of them are both connected. They actually openly say that this quote goddess has the same name or different names, but is the same goddess. And they all have in common a man-hating gynocentric viewpoint. The Catholic Church was founded by these people. Okay, so there's all sorts of weird religious things that kind of weave in and out of this. And if you take a look at, for example, Dianic Wicca, it is known as the feminist Wicca, and it is man-hating to the core. It is so gynocentric and man-hating. It is just crazy. If you think a radical feminist is a man-hating bitch, I guarantee you she's a Dianic Wiccan. If she is a rabid anti-male nutbar, I guarantee you she is a Wiccan and she follows Dianic Wiccan.
Right. Well, it's interesting. It's
weird.
Interesting that no, it is weird, but it's very important that you bring up this idea of gynocentrism in the church. I come from a Catholic background. I think about this often. I often think that the entire idea of Christ, this sacrificial person, could never have worked if Christ was a woman. And when you go into a Catholic church, you walk down the aisle, and then to your left you see this little enclave that's nice and warm and cozy, and there are candles in there, and there's this image of this woman who's carrying some precious thing in her arms. You can't even tell what it is. It's just some object that's intimately connected with this woman. And people go and they say nice things to her, and they pray to her and all this. And then, like, in the front of the church, you see this guy nailed up on a cross, you know. It's like, come on, I mean, seriously, think about this for a second. Think about this. I mean, the entire Mary worship thing was like part of this mother worship cult in the northern Mediterranean.
Yeah.
That's how it came about. It's gynocentric. It's what it is. And if you think about most religions, it's the same thing. It's this idea, and this is wow. This is something I've been like fantastically thinking about for a while now. The entire idea of religion, of course, is to set down a narrative so you can tell other people what to do. But it's so much more effective when it's gynocentric because everyone loves their mom, and everyone it's this way of extracting resources from men who happen to have children who are offered up to this church basically as minions, and that's kind of how that works out. It's really
you're kind of talking about churchianity there and the whole gynocentric churchianity. Well,
sure,
here's something kind of interesting then. This is an interesting thing that I found when I was doing this. Okay, now Diana is the goddess of fertility, the hunt, and the moon. Okay, now that's Diana, Artemis, Ashtaroth, etc., etc. All the different names for this particular goddess. Now, this goddess has a twin brother by the name of Apollo, who's the god of the sun. when the Catholic Church was formed, they needed a priesthood. They didn't have a priesthood, so they co-opted the priests of Mithras. Mithras was the sun god in Rome. The priests of Mithras went to Ephesus, which is the home city of the Temple of Diana, and that is where they declared the Virgin Mary the Queen of Heaven, which is the same name that Diana, Ashtaroth, etc.
Right.
have. So think about that for a second. The sun god's priests put on Catholic robes, went to Ephesus, and proclaimed Mary to be the new goddess.
Because they knew that would work out in the long run as far as getting more followers to the church.
Yes, and when you take a look at Ashtaroth and you take a look at the pictures of her, you will find that she is usually pictured seated with her baby son on her
indistinguishable
lap.
from the image of the Virgin Mary.
Exactly.
Indistinguishable.
Yeah. So
exactly the same.
That's that same thread of gynocentric worship. It has never stopped. It has gone all the way through, and it has been in the Catholic Church. I'm not kidding. Since day one.
Absolutely. It really, some would say, it defines the Catholic Church.
It is. Yeah. It's a very gynocentric.
As opposed,
church,
even maybe
think that it isn't.
No, it's incredibly gynocentric.
Yeah. So and
as most religion is.
Well, most is. I've found an awful lot of similarities between a lot of different religions. Let's just put it this way. I've found an awful lot of correlations between the worship of Diana and the worship of Allah and Mecca. Sure. There is a huge amount of exact same things, including the fact that the followers of Diana worshipped a meteorite, and so do the followers of Allah in the Kaaba stone.
Sure. Yep.
So, and by the way, the Kaaba stone was taken from the Temple of Ashtaroth, which is another name for Diana. So it's the exact same piece of stone that the worshippers of Ashtaroth were using. So when you look at all this stuff and the religious, and keep in mind, yes, we're in a fairly secular time now, but up until about 100 years ago, this stuff ruled people's lives.
Oh, sure,
and it formed the culture of the basis of our culture, for sure. So if you take a look at this stuff, it is interconnected all the way through all of the world's major religions on a very intimate level, and that definitely bolsters exactly the problems that we're facing today. It actually has people's faith, their deepest connection to something meaningful, if they're a faith-based person, is actively assaulted every time we try to bring up the idea of women not being perfect. And it's a big way. Break. It's a problem for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, it's one would say for most people. I agree with you 100%. There's this real problem we have with, so even if it's patently obvious that a woman, an individual, has done something wrong, or even if you generalize about women some certain characteristics that are not flattering, like hypergamy, or something like that, immediately it's like the eye of doom is upon you. You become a target just by mentioning something like that.
Well, we do live in an age where telling the truth is a revolutionary act. So
sure.
I don't think there's anything overly surprising about that. We've been dealing with a society that basically demands that if we offend anybody, we are wrong, whether it's factual what we said or not. If somebody takes offense, you're wrong. That is a bad society.
Sure it is, but for some reason it's made better because there's a gynocentricity about what is offensive and what is not offensive. It's because if you offend a woman, well, dude, you got to get slapped, dude, or else you're not a man. It's like something like that. Really, the narrative goes exactly like that.
It does. But there's with this whole hierarchy theory now, of course, this intersectionality thing that the feminists and whatnot have brought up.
Yeah, sure. It's
just another way of saying everybody's oppressed but the white males. Right?
Exactly.
It's intrinsic in our biology, yes. It is not something that has always ruled over man. If that were the case, we would still be living in mud huts.
Mhm.
So a fatalistic approach to this is not is not a realistic approach. I think that if people were to spend a little bit of time thinking about sort of where they wanted to be and what they wanted to develop, what would be a good society to be in? Not even that, but what's wrong right now? What's right in front of your feet that you think is wrong, and how do you go about changing it? And if you can't change it, what can you change that you know that's wrong? And work on that. Then we'll start to back away a bit from this. But I remember, oh God, see, I grew up through the 70s and the 80s. So I remember back when I was a kid how different society was from the way
Oh
it
yeah,
is now.
I'm the same age you are, and I do remember. And it
Yeah, I
wasn't
mean,
that long ago. It really wasn't. I mean, we're not old men yet.
oh, if you would have told me society was anything like this when I
Oh
was
no,
20 years old,
no,
when I was my age now,
not
if you would have told,
unbelievable.
I would have fucking laughed in your face. There's
Yes.
no way. But
If you
now,
had told me I was going to be a men's rights activist 10 years ago, I'd have laughed in your face.
fair enough. Yeah, I was probably about 20 years ago or so. I was probably
Oh,
involved.
all right,
Uh,
forget about
yeah, I mean, it's just sort of it's mushroomed. I'm not gonna complain about that. There's been an awful lot more interest in the last couple of years than there has been in the first, say, 10 years. Um, but it's not enough. I mean, people have to stop worrying about looking stupid, stop worrying about looking bad, recognize the truth, and stand the hell up for it already. Uh, until society does that, until we stop worrying about what the repercussions of saying something are going to be, if we don't stop doing that, we're hooked. There is no way out of this if we don't take risks. That's just it. There's no safe way to do this. There's no way to
it. Okay,
placate. There's no way to negotiate.
you've talked about you just mentioned your personal history. You're in your early mid 40s right now, as I am.
Yep.
You came of age in the 80s, early 90s. Was when you became a real adult, I guess you could say. But you also remember the 70s. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
do.
yeah, I do too. Uh, I remember Saturday morning television. That's what I remember in the 70s, amongst some other things. Anyway, that could be a whole other show.
The
But
cartoons
anyway,
were much better then.
oh, they were so much better, so much. Anyway, um, obviously, the time that you and I grew up in, and the time that many people listening to this right now, who will listen to this right now, the time they grew up in is way different than it is now. But there was the time before the way things are now that, because you've been at this for a while now, longer than I have, much longer than I have, much longer than most people have who are in this business. When what was your, and I like to ask people this, what was your red pill moment? And we're going to talk about this red pill thing as well, but at what point in your life did you come to the conclusion that something was wrong, and started saying something about
It
it?
would have
What
been.
made you want to say something about it?
I'm just trying to think back now. It would have been way back. I would have still been with my wife at the time. So I think what I was doing at that time was I was looking into. See, I've got my brother has mental issues as well as depression issues, etc. And I started looking into some things back then, and there was really nothing, and I kind of thought that was crappy. And my daughters came home one day, and they were out looking for a Father's Day card from him. They couldn't find anything that wasn't making fun of fathers, and they were crying. And I kind of realized at that point, like, this is bullshit. I mean, so I went online and I started to look at some things, and at first nothing was really personally affecting me. And then, of course, very shortly after that was when the divorce happened. So, of course, you become aware of a whole lot more problems that are out there that are kind of hidden until they hit you in the head. Um, but primarily, I think if you're really to get right back to it, if you were to get back to where I first started to go, wait a minute, men like dot dot dot, would have been when I was about 8 or 10 years old. And I remember listening to a radio station. They're talking about affirmative action and basically male privilege, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and how women were going to get these special sort of privileges to help boost them up. And I remember my mother is a very big feminist, so I remember asking her and saying, like, well, what do you think about this? I mean, is that even fair? I mean, what am I going to do when I get older and I'm looking for a job? And she patted me on the head and she said, well, don't worry, nothing bad ever happens to men, basically, is what she said. And that's when I realized, A, this whole thing is bigoted as hell, and B, women don't care. Not even your own mother cares. Okay, now, since that time, I've kind of come to realize my mother isn't as huge of a feminist as I thought she was, but at that time she kind of was. But it kind of struck me, and it's stuck with me ever since then. And I've always had this strong sense of justice. My father was a social worker. He worked for Native and Indian Affairs, which I think they've changed the name since then. I spent a good portion of my very young childhood flying with bush pilots up into very, very far northern reserve areas like Great Slave Lake, Great Bear Lake, Lake Athabasca. We're talking the northern border of Saskatchewan, Alberta, into the Northwest Territories. And his guiding principle was more along the lines of what you would call a leftist guiding principle. He was a very big social justice guy. He believed the government had lots to offer. He believed that people need help. And then towards the end of his tenure, I saw what the job had done to him. And he had become jaded and pissed off and disillusioned, I guess, with the whole process. And that's sort of what sort of woke my mind up to the idea that government isn't always the best provider of answers. And being a Canadian from Saskatchewan, that's a very, very tough pill to swallow. So all of this stuff sort of combined over my lifetime to kind of make me aware of the balances that need to be struck and the things that need to be considered when you're looking at things. And my divorce kind of showed me exactly how off kilter, how skewed the legal system and our society in general really is. And that's really, I guess, the kick. But I definitely had these tendencies, and I did them quite a bit before that. I guess I've always been an argumentative little contrarian bastard, really.
Okay, so but I remember somewhere you were. This was years ago, and I want to let you know this right now. Your videos were like you and like Thugtician and a couple other guys were the first YouTubers. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. If there's somebody I'd like to have lunch with, that's one dude I would definitely like to.
Oh hell yeah!
But it was like you, Thugtician, and of course, Man, Woman, Myth. Back in the day, around 2009 is when I really started getting into this, which wasn't that long ago. And I remember you saying, now, right? Yeah. Well, yeah, now. But I remember you saying that you, like, even back in the early days of the internet when it became more publicly accessible, there were chat rooms that had men's rights.
Oh, yeah, like Glenn Sachs. Glenn Sachs had
Glenn Sachs, he was a big pioneer back in the day. I mean,
yeah, he actually had a syndicated column that he wrote for newspapers. He had a radio station, or radio show, I guess, that was syndicated.
Yeah, a well-listened-to radio show.
Yeah, and actually Glenn did some real good. I mean, like he did the Verizon campaign where we were kind of complaining about Verizon advertising, which was successful. The boys are stupid, throw rocks at them sort of campaign that sort of blew up a little bit. Glenn did some really good stuff. And yeah, I mean, I used to be way back. I guess that's going way back now. It's probably 90, 99, 01, in that range. Yeah, I mean, I was the one that basically refused to stop calling feminists feminazis. And,
was that before or after your divorce?
That was after. That was quite a bit after, yeah.
So you were young.
Yeah. I even got in. I got up his nose a fair bit, actually. Probably pissed him right off. But what ended up happening was he ended up instituting his censorship speech codes on his forums, and that basically caused the creation of the Spearhead and a whole bunch of other different places. StandYourGround.com got a lot busier after that. And it has kind of caused a bit of a diaspora from there, and then that, of course, caused another one, because from there was actually when AVFM itself was sort of formed. Paul, if I'm not mistaken, was working for MND at that time, Men's News Daily, which was another great site, since defunct. Both Paul and Vox Day were editors of that particular online magazine, actually.
Yeah,
So
some of the first things I ever wrote. Some of the first things I ever wrote for the MRM were published in Men's News Daily, like a lot of people, really.
Yeah, a lot of people don't remember that place, or a lot of people had never seen it. Like, there's a whole pile of people that are in the men's movement now that have never heard of. Honestly,
there's so many people that have only been in it for just a few years, and I've only been in it for just a few years. I did just since 2009. That's really when I started getting in it, and that was 6 years ago. And there's a whole lot.
Yeah, of and you're an old hat now, eh?
Yeah, I am. It's kind of weird.
Isn't it though? Yeah, but I mean, think about it. I mean, you look at just the Reddits. I mean, men's rights. I think they're a little over 110,000 now. In about 4 years. Red Pill went to about 110, 115 in about 2 years.
Yeah.
It's accelerating quicker and quicker. So we're doing a good job.
I never would have dreamed that Reddit, whether it be Red Pill or Men's Rights Reddit, would have that many people interested in men's issues at this time. Even if like 50% of them are lurkers.
I think that the market for Red Pill knowledge is absolutely vast.
Sure.
I think that now, I guess it's probably time to talk about this Red Pill magazine thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Years and years ago, I did MRM and men's magazines, which were basically PDFs.
It's like 5 years ago.
Yeah, about 5 years ago.
Years.
Republished people's articles that I thought were real good, and I was going to do an app now. The problem that I'm having is that this is about $1,000 a month out of my own pocket. And on top of that, it's about 600 or 700 hours a month out of my own. Like, I've put in probably about 200 hours on this app, learning everything, and then of course a couple hours designing and stuff, plus all the time reading to find the right articles, etc. And I just don't have it. I just don't have it anymore. I can't.
That's too much time. It's just too much time. I mean, if you can find out a way where you can make, maybe $4,000 a month doing that, maybe it might be worth your while. But
the market's there.
Sure.
I'm not trying to blow sunshine, but I'm telling you that what we're dealing with right now, I would say probably 400 or so thousand people worldwide that are regularly interested in this as a topic.
Sure.
And I'd say about 100,000 of those are, say, feminists that are trying to fight against it.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But out of that group, that's essentially, there's a thing called niche marketing, and it's essentially you find the niche that's already predisposed to your message and market directly to them and don't worry about anybody else. You turn those people into sort of ambassadors for your brand once you've converted them to essentially consume your product, right? So the men's movement right now has been essentially gathering up the people that are already predisposed to believing and thinking the same way that the men's movement thinks. In addition to that, we've picked up on, especially on the men's rights Reddit, we have picked up probably 50,000 social justice warriors that are doing their level best to corrupt the shit out of the men's movement.
Oh, it's all co-option is what it is.
So I'd say about half of the people on the men's rights subreddit are
social justice warriors.
They're lying their sick fucking asses off, is what they are.
Right.
They're liars. They're social justice warriors.
See them all the time.
To thought police everybody. But worldwide, call it 2 billion English speakers. Out of those 2 billion, 1 billion are men. Out of those 1 billion, there might be, say, half a percentage point that are actually interested in men's rights issues. What percentage of those men do you think are interested in learning how to get laid easier, or learn women better, or be able to navigate the social landscape better? Yeah, that's an actual question. Like,
Well, no,
what percentage
I'm
of men
trying
do
to
you
answer
think are
that.
actually interested in that?
Well, I it's hard for me to gauge because I'm going to be honest with you. Uh, when I started getting into this business, that was not my motivation
No,
to
no,
get
no,
it.
no, no. I'm not talking
Uh,
about that. I'm saying,
yeah. How many of these guys are actually do it because they're confused about like the way they fit in with the opposite sex, and they're just trying to. Well, let's face it, mostly young men trying to get laid. I don't know. It might be a lot, maybe
okay,
20,
let me be as blunt
25%.
as I possibly can.
Sure,
Okay,
do it. Go
married
ahead,
or not, gay or straight, young or old, there isn't a man on this planet that doesn't want to have better relations with the opposite sex. You don't have to be trying to get laid. You don't have to be trying to, quote, spin plates. You don't even have to be trying to do anything other than how to avoid to get into another fight with your wife tonight. All of this information is useful to you. And I've never met a guy that hasn't found it at least useful on some level. There are people out there that are ideologically opposed to learning it, which I think is the dumbest position you could ever take. But game or red pill type related stuff is, in terms of appeal to men on a general level outside of the manosphere, is a massive appeal. And then you have the MGTOW movement as well, which also has an absolutely massive appeal outside of the manosphere. This is to people that have never heard of this stuff before, and then you talk to them and say, hey, this stuff is crap. Enjoy the decline and just do what you want. Ooh, that's kind of a neat idea. I'm going to try that. So when you take a look at what's marketable for the men's rights movement, it is quite a bit smaller than the thing that is marketable for the manosphere in general in terms of the information that we procure and we distribute. By mixing all three, you then grow everybody. And sort of that's where the big market comes from, because you might get, say, 1 million people worldwide. Once you saturate it, you might get 1 million people worldwide that are truly interested in men's rights issues. You'll probably get about 150 to 200 million people that are interested in learning more about how to improve their relations with women. And you'll probably get 500 million or so of men that are just sick to death with the crap and want to know how to deal with it without having to jump through hoops. So you're looking at a very large chunk of the men that are out there in the world right now, just with those three segments. And then you've got all sorts of stuff relating to churchianity and that sort of stuff that we could be talking about. We could encompass a very, very, very huge percentage of the men in the world, in the English-speaking world at the very least, with no problem at all. It would take nothing. That is why everybody from the mainstream media to every blogging feminist out there is doing their level best to shut us up. That's why. Because they know that we have a really compelling message.
Okay. Two things in response to that, and this is the reason why I have you on this show.
Okay.
And I'm so glad that you're on the show with me, and not, I don't know,
somebody else,
Sandman or somebody. I don't know. just threw that out there. That could have been any one of a dozen names I can think of. I'm not trying to pick on him individually.
You selfish bastard.
Yeah. Anyway, but my take has always been that, and I am a MGTOW. I am totally all about exploring these ideas of individuality and breaking away from, concepts like male mother need and stuff like that are things that ring very true for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't been as attracted to the game thing as much as the MGTOW, and I don't think that matters anymore. I used to think it did. I don't think that way anymore. But and I want to talk about that more in a little bit. But my thing has always been that there's and you brought this up earlier in the show tonight, that you can't just, being a MGTOW or just engaging in game won't stop the war on boys in education. It won't get men parity of reproductive rights, which is so important, which is crucial. If we don't have that, we have nothing, absolutely nothing. And you turned me onto that concept, and I'll give you credit for that. And it won't stop false accusations of sexual assault. It won't solve that problem. No. So that's why I believe in actual activism.
Yes.
But there are a lot of people. I mean, I would say that most people who say they speak for the entire MGTOW community, and most people who even speak for the game community, would say that no, that whole MRA thing, actually trying to change things, is not the way. You have to. It's a scam. They're trying to take your money, and things will never change because people don't care about men. So therefore, the entire thing is futile and it's not worthwhile. And I just that's something I have a problem with.
I find it very difficult to argue with them. I do. I find it very, very difficult to argue with that. Mm-hmm. There are a small, and I would say a vanishingly small subset of MRAs that actually do stuff, most of whom are employed by AVFM. I will go right out there and say
I've never been employed by doing any of this, by the way. I've never made
me either. I mean, I've never made so much as a dime doing
this. Just something I want to throw in there. No one has ever made a dime.
I think most people should understand that MRAs are basically working out of their own pocket. But I think there's absolutely, it's very difficult to make an argument that MRAs do anything. These days,
and I understand that.
Well, these days, I grant that I spend a lot of my time on Reddit, and I probably shouldn't. But these days, I find myself more embarrassed to call myself an MRA than anything else, and it's the truly worm-like, despicably spineless behavior of the vast majority of MRAs out there. And that's probably going to come off as sounding a little on the strong side. I get that.
Well, yeah, and I don't want to ask you why that is. I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything like that, because I don't think that I'm spineless, and most people like you.
Not you, no. But let's put it this way: you're an activist. You're supposed to be standing up for what is right in the face of authority. That's what an activist does.
Right.
How the fuck do you do that without looking bad? That's an honest question.
No way of getting around that. You're going to look bad. You're going to look bad to a lot of people, but there are going to be people who think like you do, who think that you're a hero for doing that. And even if it's only like one or two people, that's fine with me. Even if it's nobody, it's fine.
Well, sure, that goes right back to that whole niche marketing thing. The people that are in your group are gonna agree with what you're doing, and they're gonna like you for it. But everybody else is gonna think you're an asshole. Okay, that's just what happens. So how are you supposed to be an activist for men's rights without looking bad? And here's the other thing that drives me absolutely fucking batty about MRAs. The men's rights movement is not and never has been about equality. It has never been about equality. It has been about equal representation before the law. It has been about equal treatment before the law. Equality has never entered into the equation. Equality is a very different thing from equal treatment before the law. When I hear an MRA say that we are about equality or about both sexes, I want to punch them in the face. No, we're not. We're about men's rights before the law. And if that is a problem for you, start something else. That's my view. I mean, I know that there are several prominent MRAs that say we are all about equality of both sexes. I disagree vehemently. We are representing the people that are not being represented by the people that talk about equality all the time. We do not need to join forces with them. and we really don't need to start taking their positions. We borrow their rhetoric to show the hypocrisy of their positions. We don't borrow the rhetoric to take their positions. It's just silly. So when I when I get into these fights, I know that a lot of people are thinking, okay, this is really sort of provocative to say. But there's a very important distinction to be made. Equality before the law means nobody gets treated different from anybody else. Equality means, oh, well, women have less in this area, so we have to give them more. Men have less in this area, so we have to give them more. And it always puts somebody in charge of doling out the goodies and deciding who gets the goodies. And that has to go away completely. That's corruption. That is where corruption comes in. That is how corruption gets power. And it can't happen. We can't let it happen. That's the one easy thing. If we're all treated the same before the law, then we will all be given exactly what we are due. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And that's I can only speak for myself, but I would like to certainly think that I've upheld that very same principle myself, because equal treatment under the law does not mean equal outcome.
No, but the thing is when you say about equality,
yeah,
equality is very open to interpretation.
Sure, it is. That's the pitfall of it.
Yes, and that's why I very much go against it when people say equality. It is equality and treatment before the law. It is a very big distinction.
Yeah, and that's an old debate. It's an old debate. That's really, since people have been talking about equality and equality under the law, have been debating about since the Enlightenment times.
Oh, I totally agree. And it's a very easily corrupted thing. Years ago, I don't know, I can't remember how many years ago this was. It might have been before your time, but we all sort of the people that were involved in a fairly active level kind of got together and basically decided the reason why we wanted to be called the men's rights movement was simply because we didn't want the corruption of feminism. Women's rights movement became feminism when it became about equality. Think about that.
Right, when they said that it was all about equality and not equal representation under the law, but some other amorphous thing called equality, which really in practicality doesn't mean a whole lot, because I'm no more equal to you than you are to me. And that's
exactly. So the question that I have is what makes MRAs so much less susceptible to this corruption than feminists? Is it because we have a penis?
Well, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I don't know, but first of all, let's talk about the dearth. And you brought this up, and it's such an important topic. The dearth of actual activism that's really going on is really, really disgusting when you think about the actual number of people who are interested in this stuff that we're talking about. We have, bring up Men's Rights Reddit and the Red Pill. We're talking about a community of well over 100,000 people. And anytime somebody wants to start something, an initiative like a shared parenting initiative somewhere in, Idaho or something like that, there's a handful of states at any given time where there's a contentious battle going on that very few people seem to know about, but it's actually happening. Mm-hmm. And we have well upwards of 100,000 people or more in this community that are concerned about these issues. And these people are actually putting on this fight. They're not getting any money. But when you look at, again, like subreddits, and I'm just using Reddit as a measure, just as a measuring stick. That's all. And you can compare it to any other things. When you think about, on Reddit, feminist communities are shrinking, and they're going out of style. And there's only, they have really in many ways a fraction of the number of people engaging with them. And we know that maybe there's a quarter of the people on Men's Rights and Red Pill who are actual feminists, who are social justice warriors. Right. But these people get, just individually, like Anita Sarkeesian has become a wealthy woman by lying to people. Okay? Right. And we've demonstrated ourselves to be truthful and on the right path, but for some reason We don't get any support even amongst our own ranks. And this is the thing that really makes me angry about people who say they're MRAs. They just sit around and wait for someone to stick their neck out, and when their head gets chopped off, they laugh at them, and there's very little support.
They just point their fingers and say, "Look, are you ever stupid? You didn't do what I would have done," which is
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And they only wait and tell you after you actually made this supposed mistake that maybe wasn't a mistake, but the fact is that you were just this one person that actually went out and did something.
And invariably, the person that's doing that has never done a fucking thing before in their life.
Sure.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, like I look what happened with Roosh, for example. I mean, I defy anybody. I mean, Paul's pretty unflappable. I mean, it's pretty hard to get that guy to twist his melon up. I don't even know if Paul could have handled that. And I mean, he's been sitting in front of a hostile journalist probably every day for the last 2 years. So, right. I mean, it's to suggest that that screwing up on one whatever daytime TV show is enough to destroy you as a person after all of the things. And Roosh was not lying. He didn't even exaggerate. In fact, I think he actually underplayed exactly the amount of impact that he had on the manosphere. Excuse me, I'm just going to shut this door here.
Sure, go ahead. And remind us exactly of what this incident was that you're talking about.
Sorry, that's really, really annoying. Okay, so Roosh Vorik, or Roosh V, whatever, Velizda, whatever his name is, did do everything that he said. All of it. And then more. Royce was on his blog, so was Rollo. Those three guys, the three R's of the manosphere, did form the core of what became known as sort of the manosphere, along with guys like Paul Elam, guys like Angry Harry back in the day, although he's sort of slowed down a little bit. And not only that, but I'm gonna come right out and say this whole Elliot Rodgers thing, for example, this whole painting of everybody that's bad as an MRA or
sure, yeah.
The absolute best defense of the men's rights movement that I read was written by Roosh, and it was posted on Return of Kings. When I read MRAs talk about how we're not them and PUAs are different than MRAs and blah, 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 that's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting to see.
But we have heard this from PUAs as well. I mean, if you're talking about people actually saying.
Keep in mind, okay, like PUAs don't really have sort of the same hierarchy. Okay, like and to come right out and say it, actually, one of the top guys in the PUA end of things flat out wrote a fantastic defense of MRAs. Better than the MRAs did about this particular issue. And after he wrote this fantastic defense, he was lambasted by MRAs. And in the manosphere, I don't know if MRAs have got this message yet, but MRAs have a reputation for being the type of guy who will not hesitate. He will throw you under the bus the instant it is to his benefit to do it. I don't think that is a proper characterization of what the MRM is about.
Where do you think this reputation came from for MRA?
I will say that the behavior definitely points in that direction. I think MRAs are used to being kind of alone, right? Because I've been an MRA and a MGTOW, and I've actually been involved in games, so I kind of take all three sort of aspects. But MRAs, we've always been sort of the guys standing on the cliff top surrounded by orcs, right? You know, you got a big cliff to your back, and you got a horde of orcs to your front, and there's bodies flying off the cliffs left, right, and center, and you're battling your ass off, and there's nowhere to turn. You're surrounded by enemies. And that mindset is endemic to the MRM. And I don't think it's warranted so much anymore. It was at one point in time. I'll give you that. Pickup artists, I make a distinction between them and, say, for lack of a better term, Red Pill. I look at Red Pill as being an amalgam of MGTOW, MRM, and PUA. in pretty much equal measure. PUAs are the guys that are essentially focused on picking up chicks. And they have almost no interest in politics or, for that matter, in melting away from society. When I look at... Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I want to touch on that because you mentioned something that I've noticed that I kind of wanted to point this out. Return of Kings has, in recent months, from what I've seen, been a lot more sensitive to and pointing out things that are happening politically and what's happening with. And you can't help but think about this if you're interested in men's issues at all, whether you be a PUA or a MGTOW or men's rights activist. The overall public awareness of things like this whole Title IX hysteria that's going on in higher education right now, it has captured the public eye in a big way. And what's going on, well, not so much. I think that's the biggest thing, but there are other things as well, like double standards in sentencing, criminal sentencing, and stuff like that, which have really kind of gotten a lot more attention in the general media lately than they have in years past. And when I say years past, not that many years ago. Right. So you're starting to see, like, even PUA starting to actually post on it. I mean, I have to be honest with you. So I looked at Return of King's front page, and it didn't look all that much different from AVFM's front page.
No. It really doesn't. That's the thing that makes me kind of laugh at this whole.
Yes, that's how I was getting at that. Yes.
Yeah. You kind of twigged something there that I thought I should bring up while I'm still thinking of it. And it's those who believe that we do this in a vacuum, okay, like that there is nothing else that's sort of affecting this. It's just that we're fighting for our rights with legislators, and legislators will fight back with us, but there's nothing else affecting that particular equation. Need to look around at what is happening in the world today. Specifically what is happening with politics and how the governments of various and sundry nations are treating their citizens. And I think at this point in time, it's probably not too far-fetched for me to say there is no way on God's green earth anyone in government gives a shit about men. To put a bit of a face on it, the UVA rape culture scandal. Rolling Stone magazine, Sabrina Rubin Erdley writes this article. And it's broken up into the media, and it's talking about this whole rape culture and blah, blah, blah. But what people aren't talking about is what I think the real story is, which is one of the people from this university was contacted by the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights to put Sabrina Erdley in touch with somebody. This is all right. Talked about, right? So Erdley was put in touch with this person who lied her sick fucking ass off at the behest of the Office of Civil Rights, Department of Education. The woman at the Office of Civil Rights and the Department of Education was a woman by the name of Catherine Lamon. Catherine Lamon is the person whose name is on the bottom of the Dear Colleague letter. Okay, so the person who wrote the directive to crack down on campus sexual assault is now caught feeding a fake story to a journalist to fan the flames of campus sexual assault. And nobody's said a word about it. Why not?
Well,
this is the government manufacturing an outrage to crack down.
Well, this is a collusion between the government and the news media that's been going on for a long time. The news media makes lots of money off of this.
It's the Hegelian
lots of money. Rolling Stone, if you think that Rolling Stone regrets for 1 second that they ran that article, you're dreaming. They made millions off of that. They made
millions of bucks, yeah.
And the New Yorker, they wrote a huge spread on the Sokolowitz chick from Columbia.
Yeah.
If the article's just New Yorkers are very parochial. Maybe not many people outside of New York read it, but there are enough people inside New York to read the article for the publishers to make money. And it was a disgusting article written in the New Yorker that just completely discarded facts and demonized. It was just complete. It was awful. And of course, broader society looks at that and says, "Hey, wait a minute, this is a joke, crazy. People are coming to these campus feminists are becoming parodies of themselves."
But it's not. It's not the campus feminists.
But it's also the media. It's also the media.
It's big
and the thing is, but they don't care. They don't regret what they're doing because they're still making money. They're still making gobs of money. We're talking millions of dollars.
The print media, all of it.
They're whores. They're money grabbing whores. They've abandoned, dude. Yeah. Oh, the news media. You could honestly say, and this we were talking. Okay, you and I are the same age. In the '70s, early '80s, can you imagine any journalist behaving like the average journalist behaves now in the news media when it comes to these issues? Absolutely not. I mean, it's just it's inconceivable that they would deliberately mislead and lie, and they know they're misleading and lying.
Look at that asshole that calls himself a journalist, Jeff. Okay, this guy lied.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah.
Jeff Charlotte flat out lied.
Oh, yeah, he bought us some beer though. It was nice.
Not only that, but every journalist that talked to Jeff Charlotte and quote confirmed his story, lied too. That means Anna Maria Tremonti at the CBC also lied, and she lied while confronting Ann Cools about it.
Yep.
I'll tell you right now, there isn't a single journalist, not one, that has even tried to get in touch with me to confirm that story.
Nope.
And back in the 70s, you could not publish a quote without at least two.
You would get fired. You would get fired like that. Boom. Like that.
And now you've got journalists that are quoting other journalists and calling it a story.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, Time Magazine misquoted me saying that I said some sort of rape joke during the conference, and I didn't.
Yeah.
And now other journalists are they're quoting that, and it's like, and my favorite defense whenever this comes up, and it doesn't come up often, like you just said, very rarely has any journalist ever actually contacted anybody at AVFM, but it's happened from time to time.
Yeah.
And my defense has always been, okay, well, that person misquoted me. That made them look very silly, so now you look silly too. And if you think that I'm not going to demonstrate that you're silly, you are silly.
If you have proof, though, Robert, if you have proof, what I would do is I'd fire back and say, you are lying your ass off.
Well, that's essentially what I want to do.
And just have that. Because they have to prove that you did it. In other words, if they want to say that you are defaming them, they have to prove that you actually said what they are saying you said.
Yeah.
And if you call them a liar and they don't come out and attack you on it, then you've basically you've hurt their reputation.
Well, the thing is that doesn't matter. As I was just saying, it doesn't matter anymore as long as people read the stories. They don't care if they're lying. People know. I think many people have gotten to the point. I think the general public has gotten to the point where it's like, hey, the press lies to us all the time, but we don't care because there's clickbait.
Well, I think the most recent poll that I've seen, I think it's a Rasmussen poll or something like that, but a poll on do you trust the media? I think it's only 7% of the American public implicitly trusts it, and 23% says that they're somewhat truthful. And the rest of us basically know they're lying their sick fucking asses off. They're owned by there's 6 corporations that own every media outlet in the United States. So it's hardly surprising that they all come up with the exact same narrative at the same time. Gamergate, you talk about the honey badgers, any of that stuff. Anything the media says is a lie. Anything. As a matter of fact, I would even put it this way. If the mainstream media is attacking something, then we as men should support it.
Right.
Whatever it is they're attacking, doesn't matter, give them money, support them. Because the mainstream media is attacking them for a reason. And it ain't to help men.
No.
Right? So that's sort of what my whole activism meme or thing is built on. Is it's more along the lines of trying to, well, let's put it this way. I'd rather be James Dean than Steve Urkel. A good look, a hot car, and a leather jacket will get you a hell of a lot farther than the most well thought out argument ever will. And that is the reality of the life that we're in. So people have to start it's weird, okay? Enjoy the decline, pull away from society, learn how to manipulate right back, know what kind of rights that you have, should have, and what are being impinged on, and how you can fight back against it. And while you're doing all of that stuff, look fucking good.
Yeah, okay, I'll give you that. You better look good on camera, okay? Because if you don't, you're fucking screwed, okay?
Well, yeah.
I will give you that because we're that superficial society. But I want to let's talk about you know, again, there's difference in philosophies between what the best way forward is and what needs to happen. Of course, I still and always will adhere to the idea that there needs to be real activism. And when I say activism, I'm talking about legislative activism, people actually talking to their lawmakers, people actually doing things that gets the media's attention.
Without that, I mean, without that, you're not going to get anything. So yes, you absolutely have to have that, but it's that plus.
And when you say plus, again, articulate what you mean by the plus then.
Well, okay.
Besides just looking good, besides just being like James Dean.
Well, okay. The key to this, I mean, it's not about necessarily looking good. Okay, you know the whole thing. I think it was Nixon and Kennedy. I think it was the first televised debate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a disaster for Nixon.
Well, yeah, because Nixon was sweaty and he just looked uncomfortable and he looked like he was unattractive. Kennedy, on the other hand, was a very attractive guy and whatever, right? He got voted.
Nixon refused to actually put on TV makeup, is the story I heard.
Well, yeah, I mean,
because he didn't look disingenuous. He ended up looking really bad.
Yeah, he didn't take it seriously. He didn't take his image seriously. Now, let me ask you, honestly, I mean, if I had the exact same argument that was being presented to a room of 50 men and 50 women, the exact same argument was being made by Steve Urkel and by Jay-Z. Who do you think the people are going to listen to? Like, conjecture here. I mean, do you think that more men are going to listen to Steve Urkel or Jay-Z? Because it's obvious the women are going to listen to Jay-Z. So do you think more men would listen to Jay-Z or Steve Urkel?
Probably Jay-Z, because the women are looking at it. That's an astute argument, and I think you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. So,
most men, not all men, but most would.
Well, yeah, most would, and some men would be like, okay, let's hear your argument, and if it's a good argument, I'll go with you, and if that guy's argument is good, I'll go with him. But a popularity contest is what most of life is, and it's no different now. So you can be right until you're blue in the face, but if you're not right and likable and cool, and somebody that people want to follow, then you can be right until you're blue in the face, but you'll be alone and right in a corner somewhere. Until you can get people inspired to follow you, you can be as right as you want, and nothing will ever change. It is only after people decide, I like the cut of this guy's jib, I'm going to help him out. That's when you start to get real push. And if you really want to get right down to it, if you want to find out why the men's movement isn't really moving, that's probably got a little bit to do with it. You need to have a charismatic dude that is saying, you know what? Fuck the man. Damn the torpedoes. I'm going to take down this structure, and I don't care what it makes me look like.
Okay, but the thing is that there have been many efforts coming from the men's rights movement as such that have been just that. I mean, there's been, lobbying up on Capitol Hill against VAWA was quite an experience when I did it, even if it was with Ed Bartlett. Okay, that was a long time ago. And there were a lot of other things too. The whole. I remember, and I'm just talking about myself personally, and I'm not bragging about myself. I'm not. But when I saw the headline from Al Jazeera after I got through with an interview from him saying men's rights activist says feminists have turned rape into a scam, and they had my big picture right there. I was like, yeah, it is a scam, and I'll defend that any day of the week, you know. And it's always been my thing. Like, hey, yeah, I did say that. People still come to me all the time. Hey, you're the guy that said that rape is a scam. I'm like, yeah, I did. Want to talk about it? And it's still fun. It really is just as fun as the day when I first saw that headline. It really is cool. So
that's the right attitude to have, though. I mean,
but that's and you're right that so few people have that. But I don't see a whole lot of well, first of all, I don't see a whole lot of MGTOWs, first of all, publishing their own name and writing as such under their own name. And I don't see a whole lot of like real forward pushing communication like that coming from the MGTOW community, or really for that matter from the PUA community. So
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to say because the PUA community isn't really focused on that sort of thing.
And by what its definition is, of course it's not. So you can't criticize them too much. Yeah. But when I hear people criticize MRAs for not doing such, I can't help but be kind of critical.
Well, okay, it's no secret. Almost everybody criticizes each other in the manosphere.
Yep.
I had some MGTOW basically at the video that you had responded to me, or you had responded to asking me to come and do this. There's actually a MGTOW on that video that's basically saying, you know, you haven't spelled out your position on this properly. You haven't spelled out your position on that, and you. Okay, first of all, the irony of a MGTOW trying to tell me you haven't told me what to do properly yet is just a little weird. Okay, but it's almost like there are so many people that just can't figure out what to do on their own, and they need to have other.
I would say that's the biggest problem overall, actually.
Yeah, and when you say to them, what's at your feet that you can do something about, that's what you should do, it's almost like they kind of deer in the headlights, like, what? What? You mean that's me? And it goes back to that whole nobody shows their face and nobody uses their real name, and it also ties in with the whole fear of looking bad. And it's basically the repercussions of this activism. And yes, I know I suffered quite a few of them, so I know that they're not always easy to kind of weather. But it has to be done.
I wanted to ask about that if it's not too difficult for you to talk about.
No, go ahead.
You were years ago one of the few people actually put your name out there and your face out there and said, "Hi, I'm Dan Moore. I'm doing this. I'm writing this MRM Magazine." And you were one of the few people who actually put their name out there and did that at a time when almost nobody was doing that.
I was the first.
Yeah.
I was the first to use his own name, and I was the first to put his own face up on there. And first by probably about a year.
Yeah.
Now, I know that the reason why a lot of people didn't want to do it was primarily because of the shit that I faced when I did it.
What did you face when you did it?
Oh man, I had lost job after job from people complaining to the boss. I was blacklisted out of an entire industry. I was dragged in. Oh, this was a good one. I was dragged into the cop shop to answer anti-terrorism questions because.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
I've had a fair bit of kind of shit and abuse heaped on me. I've been through depression. I've been through mental illness. I've been through unemployment. Blackballing. If it makes you feel better, though, the employer that I was last working for, when I got kind of dragged down to the cop shop and snapped, has flat out said that anytime I want a job, I'm back anytime, and no matter what anybody says, they don't give a shit. They actually looked into what I was doing. The boss, the guy who owns that business, looked into it and said, I like what he's doing, and I would like to hire him if he ever wants to come back here. So it's not that every business will toss you out on your ear. They might They might not, but a lot of people, if they're given the consideration, they go, ooh, you know, this is actually worthwhile, and I see no reason why I should suffer for this. So there are good employers out there. But yeah, I mean, I got hammered hard. And to top it all off, and this is the thing that really sort of pissed me off, to top it all off, I had a bunch of MRAs basically disown me, call me a fucking nutcase. I had a couple of guys send me PMs that basically said, good, I wish you would have killed yourself, you fucking idiot, blah, blah, blah.
This is when you were going through all this? Because I wasn't aware of this.
Oh, yeah. These are actually MRAs, people that were on the boards for months, people that I didn't get along with, but were also MRAs. And I got all sorts of nasty private messages and emails and stuff from people that I had thought I was on the same side as.
And what was their criticism of you because you were...
Because I believed the wrong things. I've got MGTOWs that are sending me death threats because I think that a lot of MGTOWs are way too zealous. I've got PUAs, and I'm not saying death threats in the Sarkeesian sort of way. I'm saying, like sending me pissed off emails like, I'll fucking stomp your face into the curb. Because I'm not purist enough, I guess, in the MGTOW message. And the same thing happens with PUAs, and to some degree the same thing happens with MRAs. You can't speak against any of these groups without them attacking you like you're some kind of a heretic. And it is that zealous religious behavior that really turns me off from a lot of this stuff. And a lot of the reason why I've been gone for pretty much for the last couple of years is because the instant you step off the narrative, which we all love to bitch about the SJWs, but the instant we step off the narrative that is being promoted by the new men's movement, you're attacked by other MRAs, by other MGTOWs, by other PUAs. And it is every bit as insidious and coming from the exact same place as SJWs telling people that if you are a homophobe or a sexist, that you're the evil thing, the most evil thing on the planet. It is the exact same impetus. It's the same reasoning behind these people doing the same thing.
So you think it's a similar mindset?
Yeah, it's a disease. It's a politically correct disease. Believe what I believe, or you are a heretic.
Well, I mean, and there are people who accuse you of being a politically correct person if you just differ a little bit or differ from an approach to the same problem.
I've had a lot of people say that I make the men's movement look bad, and it would be best if I disappeared. I get probably 2 or 3 of those emails a week.
I've never gotten anything like that, and to be honest with you, I've never had serious problems. Well, that's not true. What got me into the men's rights movement, one of the main things was when I was working in higher education, and I wasn't even a men's rights activist at the time, but I actually started saying, hey, this is a hostile environment for male students. We should look at this and this and that. And I was working in institutional research at the time. I was one of those people who actually put together numbers and reports and said, hey, we have a problem with male students, and that was like the beginning of my end. The end of my career in higher education, but I wasn't a men's rights activist back then. But since I've been actually an unabashed men's rights activist, I've had like family say nasty things to my face, and random people like at the bar or something like, hey, I recognize you. You're that misogynist. But I've never had anybody the last job I had, which I quit after 22 years. They thought that it was, oh well, that's Bob. He's just kind of like some weird pot smoking eccentric, whatever. He's been that for like the past 15 years, and we're just going to ignore that. And like this new job I have now, I don't even think they give a shit what you do outside of work. They're just something they just don't pay attention to.
Which is great. Every boss should be like that.
Oh well, it's support. I mean, I'm working I'm kind of like in a union referral system now, and I think it's just kind of like that whole thing where it's like, hey, you're not at work, but if you're not screwing up at work, no one gives a shit what you do. as long as dude's got your back at work, and as long as no one gets hurt, it's like, because what I do now is kind of like it's kind of weird. It's more like a blue collar physical labor thing that it's not a safe way of making a living. I'm a stagehand, for crying out loud. It's not. It's just as long as you do your job, no one gives a shit. The show went off on time. Bob's
That's
dependable. It's like no one gives a fuck what I mean, I could probably roast pickled mummies and eat them in omelets, and no one would give a shit.
Yeah, and see,
but but that's just so I never had the same thing you had, and I never, and while I've really in many ways I have not shrunk away from the controversy of the conflict between MGTOWs and MRAs or PUAs or whatever. I've never shrunk down from that, and I've never gotten any death threats. I've gotten people giving me nasty emails and stuff like that, but never like death threats or anything like that. Am I doing something wrong? What can I do to piss people off more?
Well, when I was going through all that stuff, like about a year and a half, 2 years ago, like when I was going into the hospital, I actually got lots of MRAs from the men's rights Reddit saying, "Go kill yourself."
Do you think they were actual MRAs, or are these?
Oh, I know they are. I know there were people that have been posting there for years as an MRA. They weren't a false flag.
And why were they saying those things? What?
Because they didn't like me.
Do you?
Yeah,
Why did they
I don't have a problem with that. I don't mind.
I can't imagine any reason why people would like you.
What's that?
Well, I can't imagine why anybody wouldn't like you, because I like you and I don't understand. Well, it would never occur to me to send you a nasty look.
Well, I'm so soft spoken and polite, and I never say anything to people that they don't want to hear. Yeah, but
you're not. I mean, seriously, I've never. I mean, I don't. I mean, I can still disagree with somebody as long as they're reasonable and not. I mean, I don't understand. I don't know. I've never gotten anything like that, but I've never shrunk away from an argument or anything like that. I've never had any problem like that. But I don't know. I guess it's different for every person.
It's the purists, right? It's the ones that think that you're either an MRA or an MGTOW or a PUA or red pill or dark enlightenment. Like you have to pick your tent, and you can only be in that tent. Those people are the ones that send that stuff. The ones
it's an ideology mindset, is what it is.
The ones that get pissed off that that I might be inspiring somebody to leave the plantation is really what it boils down to. That's actually what that MGTOW's whole argument was. If people learn this game thing, they might not be MGTOWs anymore. That was the crux of the argument. And I don't think that that's even close to true. For example, game and MGTOW is 100% compatible. So we're seeing
the same thing with like men's rights activists like myself, who honestly believe that there needs to be political action and that there are certain problems that aren't going to be solved otherwise. Just by saying that, suddenly I can't be even be considered to be a MGTOW, even though I consider myself to be a MGTOW.
Yeah.
I mean, and sure, I don't identify myself one bit with being a PUA, but I mean, and I've had, and as you know, and I've talked with you about this face to face and with a lot of other PUAs, that there's something about the PUA philosophy that just does not appeal to me. I can still sit down and have a beer with you, for crying out loud.
Well, sure, I mean, and the other side too is there's all sorts of PUA sort of memes and understandings of the world that are suffused throughout the manosphere. One of which you used quite recently yourself, called hypergamy. Hypergamy as a concept was not part of the lexicon of the men's rights movement until PUAs brought it in.
Oh yes, and MGTOWs kind of went their way with it too as well.
Yeah,
and I remember I got in huge trouble with the MGTOWs because during one of my radio shows there was this infamous moment apparently when I said, this hypergamy thing, talking about it all the time isn't useful. We should stop talking about it as much as it. And then all of a sudden, boom! It was like, and all these people that I really respect were all of a sudden they're all in my case. I was like, wait a minute! I had to get Stardust on the radio. I said, listen, all I meant was, and we had a great conversation, and all I meant was like, you can't deny women their humanity any more than you can deny men their humanity, and that's all I was saying. Now,
that's a very controversial point to a lot of MGTOWs.
It is incredibly controversial, but it's not. Is it really like? Does it have to be that divisive amongst people who have many shared interests?
But that's the thing that drives me absolutely flippin' batty about this. When you take a look at the three legs of the tripod of the manosphere that are fighting incessantly between each other, there is absolutely nothing precluding adoption of all three viewpoints that will actually make any of those viewpoints invalid. Okay, so if you're an MRA and you learn game, you're not no longer an MRA. You're just somebody who knows more. If you're a MGTOW that learns men's rights issues, you're not no longer a MGTOW. You're a MGTOW that knows these other things, and it goes all the way through the whole thing. So where does the opposition to learning this stuff come from? Is it because, oh, you're wasting my time that I could be filling with Tinder posts from feminists to be outraged by? Is it you're wasting my time with this information instead of me playing a video game for 20 minutes? There is no legit reason at all, in my mind, there is no legit reason at all to refuse to learn this stuff. You can read it, reject it all you want, but to refuse to learn it is just, it is the absolute height of fucking stupidity. It is like saying, I don't believe in guns, so I'm going to throw my gun on the ground while this army that's coming over the hill right now has guns and they're going to shoot me. But I don't believe in guns, so I'm just going to put the guns down and maybe they won't shoot me. It's the same sort of mindset.
Sure, and I must say, I must make a confession. I've said publicly to lots of people say, the whole like PUA thing is just the idea that the answer to all things in life is if you just follow these rules and therefore you'll have healthy relationships with women, whatever that means. That's always something that I must admit I've been down upon.
Whoever said that was the answer to all things in life?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, there are a lot of sorry, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I have a cognition problem, and I will concede that might be the case. But it's just, but there is, and I wanted to present that as a disclaimer, saying that I am somewhat guilty of this myself. Having a camp-like idea, yeah, sure, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I've been shooting messages back and forth with several people lately, where it's like, MRAs are responsible for causing divisions in the manosphere, and I shot back saying, listen, there's been way too much shit being thrown around by all sides for that statement to mean anything whatsoever. It doesn't. But at the same time, do you think, and this is something I wanted to touch on, and I'm sure that MRAs in large part are guilty of this too, do you think that a lot of this campish mentality is coming from people on whatever camp they're from, is maybe due to a desire to have kind of an easy, simple solution in their own lives to what they perceive as their problems, and that a lot of ways that this mentality comes from maybe a lazy attitude in that respect? Maybe I'm not articulating the question that well, but it just seems to me that it's whenever people become like this, whenever they become ideologues, it's like it kind of absolves them from the responsibility of having to have their own opinions challenged, and it's hard. I mean, and I am guilty of this. Everyone is. There's a good
portion of that. There's a good portion of that, but I think if you were to read or reread Alison Tiemann's article called "One Good Man," you'll have your answer.
Yeah, okay.
Because the people that say, well, I'm not a MGTOW, those guys are losers. I'm not a PUA, those guys are pussy beggars. I'm not an MRA, those guys, right? The people that are doing that are engaging in one good man behavior. I'm not like those other people. I'm better than them. All of them. Every single person that says that, every single person that throws the other groups under the bus is trying to be the one good man. And I don't give a fuck who it is that does it. Anybody that does that is trying to be the one good man.
So you think at its base it's the need to kind of, first of all, see yourself as this purest individual, and then as a secondary or tertiary, you really think that it's the desire to be attractive to women that causes
No. Okay. It's the desire to be seen as the good guy.
The good guy.
Taking the high road, right? The one good man.
Right. But in her article, there was the as I remember, and it's been years since I've read that article. But from what I remember. Again, it's been years, but the theme was that this is so women would like you.
Well, that's sort of the
Make them
pretense of
off.
the article itself.
Sure, yeah, sure.
But the message behind that article is along the lines of,
I see what
I
you're
am
saying.
better
Yes,
than that guy, right? I'm separate from that guy.
a holier than thou attitude.
Sorry?
A holier than thou attitude, for lack of a simpler way to put it, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, you'll find it in churchianity as well, right? I mean, I belong to the true faith. Those guys are heathens, therefore I'm better than them. It is the need to be the cool kid, essentially, is what it is. It's the need to be the one that's right, the one that everybody wants to follow, the cool kid in the group. And okay, here's the best way to put it. In sales, when dealing with a competitor, the last thing that you should ever do is cut down your competitor. Don't say their products are crap. Don't say they're trouble to deal with. Don't say that they're too expensive. Just acknowledge and move on. When somebody is denigrating a competitor in the men's movement, MRA, PUA, MGTOW, you don't agree with them. You don't even agree with them. You don't start that conversation. You don't perpetuate that conversation, even if you are in competition with that other group. You don't get in the way of somebody making a mistake if you don't like them, but you don't actively call out your competition, because almost always that backfires. Now, it'll either backfire by the customer going, you know what, I actually like the sales guy there better, and obviously you're just as much of a liar as him, and leaving. Or you guys are both assholes and they leave and find somebody else. Or they deal with you, but they think that you're pretty low on the totem pole. You're one of those guys that, you know, you'll throw anybody you can under the bus for a sale. You're a shyster. Those are the sort of thought processes that go through people's heads for the most part whenever you cut down your competition. That's no different. It is absolutely no different between one group of the manosphere cutting down another group of the manosphere. And when I said in that video that I think the one criteria for tossing somebody out of the manosphere on their fucking ear is don't do this or do this because it'll make us look bad if we don't do that thing. If you hear you look bad, you're making us look bad, ban that person from your site instantly. Don't even give them a fucking warning. Just say, you know what, you're gone. See ya. And you want to see the men's movement become effective, get rid of those people. You'll cut the size of this thing in about half, but all you'll be left with are people that want to do stuff. Instead of the guys that are going to sit there and argue and navel gaze and parse everything that you do right down to the smallest little thing, every little detail, making sure you don't look bad.
Yeah, and that's what you see happen a lot. There's a whole lot of hair splitting, which is exhausting and counterproductive.
It's meant to be. It's walrusing. It's the exact same thing that the walruses do when they come and they ask you all sorts of questions. It's just they're trying to waste your time. I do think that there are people quite high up in the men's movement that are false flags. And I think that those people are fomenting discord at every level they can. So I don't think it really matters who it is. If somebody says this makes us look bad, even though it's standing up for your principles, even though it's perfectly in line with everything else, it's just too radical or something like that, toss them. Even if they own the fucking site, toss them. On their ear. Goodbye.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, you at the same time, and I agree with you 100% that this idea that you have to be scared of what other people think of you is
if
something
you're scared of what other people think of you, what are you doing as an activist?
You can't operate. You can't be in this business. Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
At the same time, you have to at least appreciate what's going on around you and how people think psychologically about different groups psychologically about things, and use that strategically.
Well, you do.
It's not something you have to be sophisticated in that manner.
Sure,
to some extent.
Bob, how does being politically correct, for lack of a better term, how does being politically correct or palatable get us anywhere.
It never has.
Never.
But you have to understand the mechanisms by which people use to make you seem unpalatable or unlikable. You have to understand it and think about them strategically. And I trust me, I am not a man of tact in this regard.
Neither am I. I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
The one thing
it's not an art I like to engage in, but it is something I have to say. You have to appreciate it.
Yeah, but you got to keep in mind there's absolutely nothing. I mean nothing that men's activists can do that will not be made to make us look bad.
Sure.
There's no doubt about that. There is no action that a men's rights activist can take that will make the mainstream media go, "Oh, these guys have a point."
Well, and therein lies, I think, the grand strategy is continue doing what you're doing, and the more people try to make fun of you, the more people will look at you, and the more people look at you, the more reasonable people, because you can't fool all the people all the time. And the more people talk about you, you will win every time. James said that to me one time. It's one of the smartest things he's ever said.
That's exactly the right way to do it.
And even if they're saying bad things about you, they're gonna read up on this stuff, and it's gonna change their opinions. This is what happened with the SPLC thing.
Exactly.
With AVFM, it was the best thing that ever happened to us. The best thing that ever happened. And a lot of people abandoned AVFM after that.
Even though they're still calling it a hate group, even to this day, quoting the SPLC, right? It was supposed to be the kiss of death, PR-wise. The SPLC
was the best thing
organization
that ever happened to us.
Yeah. That's what happens when you stand up for what you believe in and you're unapologetic in standing up. It's when you apologize at the end of the whole thing, when they attack you and you go, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to be so rude." Okay? That's when you lose. When they attack you and you go, "Fuck you," that's when you win. and it's not so much the act of being nasty or saying mean words. It's just the act of refusing to give in to their pressure tactic. That's all they have is pure pressure. Right? Right now, what they're doing, because they have the public narrative, they have peer pressure, they have people afraid to stand up, is they're doing things like firing coaches because he speaks up about his son's sexual assault convictions.
Right.
But once they can get away with that, then maybe they'll start doing things like firing people for having the wrong political beliefs, which ain't that far off, by the way. They're already starting to do it if you do it openly. And then pretty soon it will be jailing people for having the wrong political beliefs. There's no point along that path where you can be nice and lobby to have it end. We have to change hearts and minds of the man on the street, not the women, the men. Because if men are convinced to the point where they're perfectly willing to stand with a girl right in front of them who is berating him for believing that men and women should have equal rights, and if that man can stand there and calmly with a straight face say, "I believe in this stuff, why don't you?" When the average guy on the street can do that, that's when we're going to win. Because then, how do you argue against it? The key to beating a feminist is to make them look bad. The reason why people that are trying
to expose them for what they are.
Well, expose them for what they are is one thing, but you got to keep in mind, projection goes throughout all of the social justice warrior / feminist way of doing things. The people that are saying that makes us look bad, all of them, every last one of them are either a social justice warrior or under the influence of. Okay, they've been convinced or fooled by. But that narrative came straight from the social justice warrior playbook. It is gamma rabbit behavior. Anybody that's read Vox Day's website will know, Vox Populi, will know what a gamma rabbit is. And that's basically the guy, quote, gamma male, who just sits there twitching his nose at you instead of actually doing something because he's terrified all the time. And what he does is he tries to look for the rest of the rabbits in the warren to attack you at the same time. And if they won't, then he retreats instantly because he's got nothing. That's the type of person that we're up against. And if you stand up, they're chickens. They're chicken shits. They won't do anything until they have more people behind them to gang up. And when you go to Reddit, that's what you get. You get one social justice warrior who tells you that makes you look bad, and then 3 or 4 more, they're probably sock puppets that pile on it and say, yeah, you should go away, blah, blah. You don't belong in this movement. That impetus, that fear of looking bad. The fear of looking bad is the worst thing that has ever happened to the men's movement. It's the worst thing that's ever happened to men, period. Because when you really get down to it, fear of looking bad is the reason why political correctness got the hold that it did. And because political correctness got the hold that it did, all these draconian laws and rights abatements were made possible. The reason why men don't have parental rights, the reason why men don't have any kind of representation in divorce, the reason why the laws are so fucked up as they are right now is 100% because men, for fear of looking bad, were too fucking chicken to do a thing about it. Yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but it pisses me off when I think about this.
Well, no, that's good. Well, listen, it's about 10 to 11 right now. Usually we like to stop the show after about an hour and a half, between an hour and a half and 2 hours long. This is a good way to end it. This has been a great conversation. I got out of this conversation exactly what I wanted to, and I hope that other people have listened to it. I mean, I think this is a useful conversation to have. It's a conversation I've been wanting to have for a long time. And thank you for joining us tonight. Really
well, you know, honestly, Bob, I've been wanting to have this conversation for a while too, and I'm more than happy to. Anytime you want me to come back and rant,
sure, absolutely.
I'd be more than happy to. Absolutely, yeah.
Great. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Dan, for having us. James, do you have any advice for us, our listeners? Still there, James?
That wasn't James. That was my dog.
Oh, okay.
Oh, sorry about that. I was on mute. Yes, folks, I do have some advice. Take the red pill.
That's fantastic.